And here we are with Senor Lenjoint. Now today, it's going to be a different one. This is an MMA show. This is just a Lenjoint after dark. It's a catch-up hours. back in knots, and from all over the world. How you doing, my friend?
Not too bad, mate. How you doing? Yeah, we're talking about after dark. How quick has it gone dark? Like literally instantly, mate. I'm in my nephew's bedroom, and it was light a minute ago. I've just looked up, and it is pitch black here. It's crazy.
I feel like a budgie because as soon as it gets dark, I get sleepy, and I think, okay, it's 5 o'clock. It's too early for a nap, but here we are. I mean, when I don't know, I
Yeah,
could have a nap when I want, but here we are. Each their own. So I wanted to catch up with a few different things like today, because obviously we're normally very MMA focused, which is
yeah.
always good staying on brand. But
See?
you've seen quite a lot of the world in the last couple of months. It'd be interesting to go in a bit more into that. So,
Yeah, I've
regards
seen
of go on.
yeah, I've seen a fair bit. Yeah, plenty of Thailand. So
So I want to go more on the origin. Obviously, the trip you came into some travel expenses because obviously you had your accident. But from there
yeah.
onwards, with the trip, what was the initial intentions behind everything you sort of saw? Was it sort of get a starting point and go from there? Was it quite thought out? What was your initial sort of, I don't know, intentions from the word
Mate,
go with that?
yeah, I just had no idea what I was doing. I literally just like booked a flight, one-way flight to Thailand, and was just kind of winging it from there. And then obviously just ended up staying in Thailand. Did go to Philippines as well. That was awesome, beautiful country. But spent most of my time in Thailand. Same with the diving as well. I never really meant to do diving the way I have ended up doing it. So yeah, it was kind of just sort of wing it and just things happen and just went with it, and that was that.
So with that whole sort of change of scenery in itself, and not just like the locational sense, like geographical sense, but more the
Yeah.
just everything really. Because again, before you moved out there, were you doing the sort of 9 to 5 stuff? Were you sort of doing shift work? What was your like day to day looking like, opposed to deep sea diving in sunny Koh?
So I work as a tattooist. That's my, trade, I guess, if you can call it a trade. But yeah, so I was working as a tattooist, obviously, 5 days a week, and then at weekends I was doing my MCing and stuff like that, and then just saving as much money as I could. And then obviously I did have the sort of payout after my accident as well, which was a massive boost for my traveling expenses and sort of living expenses while I was doing it. But yeah, it was just basically, so I got to the point where I've always wanted to travel. I've never done it. Got this money from my accident. Started saving more from the tattooing and sort of MC side of stuff. And then, yeah, handed my notice in, packed up my house, told the people I rented off that I was going to leave, and got myself a little storage unit and just a couple of my essential stuff that I was keeping, went into the storage unit and off I went.
Now, an interesting thing with this whole sort of dynamic, and also we'll clarify when you say emceeing, it's like going to the events and you're the announcer, you're saying the same thing, but you're not like a old school garage night. You're not, Tim Westwood. It's all right.
Raps coming terrible on a mic that way.
We'll get somewhere. We'll be all right. That's next. That's project for next time round. But anyway, post COVID. But what's interesting when it comes to this sort of scenario, and more so like when it comes to like lottery winning, this sort of thing, where people hear they're okay, we'll throw away the day today, we'll say fuck off to everyone and go from the sunset, happy days. But the interesting thing is, you
Yep.
sounded like quite content in the way you were. It seemed like you had quite a nice setup. You had an environment you were happy in. And now, when you come into this sort
Yep.
of cash injection, it's interesting how it wasn't a sort of sayonara sort of thing. And it's interesting. Like, was this trip something you'd have wanted to do anyway? Or was it something like, okay, I've now been given an opportunity, I might as well do it for the not for the sake of it, but sort of it's something I could do, opposed to something I've always wanted to do if I had X, Y, and Z. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Kind of a little bit of both. So I've always wanted to travel all my life, literally since. So like, in school, everybody was like, what are you going to do when you're older and stuff. And then when I got to sort of like teenage years, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to live in England. That was always my answer. I just wanted to travel. I wanted to get out, and I'm not a fan of this cold weather. I don't know why I've come back to England this time of year. I honestly don't. But I'm just not a fan of this cold weather. So I always wanted to live or be around beaches and the sunshine and stuff like that. But I had kids when I was very, very young. So I didn't obviously want to travel for any length of time and obviously miss out on them growing up. So kind of my traveling kind of got on the back burner a little bit. And then as my kids came to sort of the age where I could then sort of go traveling, so both my kids are over 18 now. I know I only look 25, but yeah, I've got two kids over the age of 18. So they both got to the right kind of age. So then I was already starting to think about, okay, now I can start to, think about traveling in the next year or two once they both hit 18. And then obviously I had the accident. And then it took me a few years to get back on my feet after that. And then obviously with the extra cash injection from the accident, that just sort of like sealed the deal and was like, right, my kids have just hit 18. I've now got this excess cash that I didn't have. Let's do what I've always wanted to do and travel a little bit and maybe live somewhere where I don't have to get up and put a million layers of clothes on and, go out the door looking like a Inuit for coming out of the igloo.
I mean, this is it, and as well, I think tattoos do take off some of the ears, so it's all right. So you keep getting more on your head, I think, to try and take a bit of the slack off.
Yeah,
but yeah.
cover the growth.
Covering the growth and the gaps.
Yeah,
I need to get some face ones to fill in my beard. But that's another conversation. But so with that in itself, so I think almost the terminology is interesting. The fact that it's not a visit, it's a traveling. It's trying to experience it, trying to live in that sort of environment. Yeah. Now, what was the initial thoughts when you went into these sort of new areas as such? Like, have you been to Thailand prior to this? These areas you sort of not done any reconnaissance on, but something you had an idea of, okay, when I get there, I'd like to eventually or start doing certain things? Was it hit the ground running and sort of play it by ear? What was your initial plan in inverted commas, but more outline sort of idea?
Mate, I don't have a plan for much of things in my life, to be honest. I just kind of bumble through it and see what happens. So yeah, my initial plan was, okay, I'll get to Thailand. It's a good place to start because it's so, visited by travelers. So there's so many options of hostels and, places to go and see. And there's, the touristy stuff to do in Thailand. It's a tourist destination. So that's why I chose sort of Thailand first to go. I had a friend that was also planning on doing some traveling as well, and she was starting in Thailand. So it just made it easy that we went and traveled together on the way over there on the plane, and then sort of like hung out together for the first week or so, and then kind of like went our separate ways. So that was the original plan, just to sort of like hit Thailand and then see what happens. And I actually went off to a little island with my friend. We visited that. That was pretty cool. And then I headed back to Bangkok, and then she went off to, I think she actually went to Chiang Mai, which is up north of Thailand. And I wasn't planning on going up there with her. So I was kind of sat in a hotel in Bangkok, and, just literally popped up a Facebook status saying, I'm in Bangkok. Anybody that's traveled before and have been around Thailand, if you've got any sort of good advice and places to go and visit, hit me up, and then I'll kind of make a plan off people's recommendations. And the first guy that sort of messaged on that Facebook post was a guy called Rich Westwood. He's a guy I know from, years ago in Nottingham when I used to work security, and he was a bar manager and stuff. So, and he was like, I'm actually living over here. I'm on Koh Tao. I'm a dive instructor. I run a dive shop as a manager there. And he was like, if you fancy doing some diving, hit me up, come and visit me. And that was actually one of my things on, I had a list of a few things that I wanted to actually do, that I've always wanted to do, and what I wanted to do while I was traveling, and diving was one of the main ones. So yeah, I was sat in Bangkok and, went online, actually didn't even go online, went straight outside and went to one of the little travel shops that's all around Thailand, and was like, right, how do I get to Koh Tao? And they're like, okay, you catch a bus for 5 or 6 hours, and then, you catch a ferry over, and then another sort of like ferry and stuff. So booked all that and messaged Rich saying, have you got any accommodation sort of like around your dive shop? And he was like, yeah, well, I'll sort that out for you when you get here. And yeah, that was it. Headed off to Koh Tao. And so when I got there, just, started diving, and that was the start of my my dive journey.
There's a pun somewhere, and I feel like I'm missing it, but we'll get there. The thing with this, I thought it was really refreshing and really interesting. This whole approach to the situation is you didn't look for something already in your current skill set. You didn't look for, okay, I've got X amount of years of tattooing. This is something I know, not martial arts, nothing like this, something you already were comfortable with. It was something completely sort of looking for it with an open mind, and then given an opportunity, you didn't try to find a bias with something you'd already be competent at. It's something, something new. And this is kind of an interesting sort of premise that when it comes to these sort of trips, like I'm one for organized fun. Like I like to know what I'm doing, this, that, and the other. Obviously, we all want to pretend, I don't know, I like to pretend I'm independent and this, that, and the other. No, I like my schedule, my itinerary, but I don't know. This is kind of,
Itinerary ready,
this is it.
hour by hour, itinerary done, labelled, the whole lot.
So guys, we're 3 minutes past fun now. We need to shoot off. We need to get some recovery. This, that, and the other. But no, that's what I thought was really interesting. That kind of very present kind of mindset. Okay, this is what I need to do now. Okay, no stress. I'll work it out. Okay, I'll speak to so and so and do this. Like, imagine the equivalent. I don't know. Like you're in Manchester and you try to get to Liverpool for a job. You go to the person who owns a local shop. They can tell you to fuck off. You wouldn't quite get the same level of hospitality level of. I don't know. It's just such a.
No, probably.
You know what I mean? That sort of location, because you're in Thailand in this sort of environment, it feels, again, I'm very much generalized, but again, it's a different, you almost treat it differently. And then after moving there afterwards, like regardless of your timelines in your own world, like obviously we know now it's Thursday, it's 5:30. Like, were you ever present? I think, okay, I don't even know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. I don't care. We sort of just work out and then sort of pick up as we go along. You see what I mean? Like sort of, I don't know how not scheduled as such, but you know what I mean? How present were you in that sense of things? Like, I don't
know. I've never been the best when it comes to days of the week anyway. It was kind of like, I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I know what I'm doing the day after that because it's the day after tomorrow. But, as far as Wednesdays I do this, and on Thursdays I do this. I've never been the most structured person anyway. So, I just kind of went with the flow. It was kind of like, all right, I'm here in Bangkok. Went out, got my ticket. Okay, when do I leave? Okay, so it's tomorrow, and you leave at 8 at night, and you travel through the night and stuff. So I was like, okay, cool. Went back to my reception. Was like, I'm leaving tomorrow, so I only need one more night, and then I'm off. I'm out of here, sort of thing. And we're in the traveling sort of like circumstances. That's kind of normal. You just kind of you're hanging around for. I'm here for 2 or 3 days. But say you meet up with a group of people, and you really enjoy spending time with that group of people, then you just go down to reception, like, okay, I'm staying an extra 2 days. So you end up, instead of 3 days, you do 5 days there. Or you're like, okay, I've not really met anybody here that I've clicked with. So I'm going to, I'm going to, do what I did and literally just go to the travel thing, go, right, I want to go to this place. There's your ticket. You go tonight or you go tomorrow or, whenever the bus is scheduled. But you just kind of go with the flow.
It sounds liberating and stressful at the same time. I don't know how I feel about that, but here we are.
It is a little bit of times. It can be a little bit of both.
But this is kind of the beauty of the whole experience of it all. The fact it's not so much, I did this, that, and the other. No, I had to go through this to make sure we got there in time. We had to, speak to so-and-so and all these extra sort of experiences. Now, regards of starting diving and off the bat, what was that like for you in the sense of, okay, this is something I haven't really done before, something I wanted to do, and then that transition from something new to a not career, but something you were doing for your job out there for the time being? What was that sort of, I don't know, that learning phase like? Was it quite a natural thing to you? Was it something quite alien? What was the, I don't know.
So me personally, I've always been a bit of a water baby anyway. So I've always, loved swimming. I'm normally the first one to jump in the pool if I go on a holiday, first one in the ocean if I go on a holiday. And, I've always got a mask on my head and dropping down under the water and stuff. So I've always been like that anyway. So for me, getting in the water was really natural. It is a little bit weird to breathe underwater for the first time, actually be able to go and take that first breath. But, I still felt really natural in it. And we actually, Rich was the one that taught me my open water, my advanced and stuff. And I actually flew straight through. So the way the course works, it breaks down. So you do some theory work first. So you watch a couple of videos and you go through some questionnaires and just to make sure you understand sort of like the dangers, because it is quite dangerous. So make sure you understand the dangers properly, but then also make sure you understand a little bit about the equipment before you actually do anything. And, you do an equipment setup. So your instructor will show you how to set up and break it down, show you, which hose goes in where and everything and how it's going to work and stuff. So you learn a little bit of that first. And then you actually go into either a swimming pool or into a really shallow, really still part of the ocean. Depends on what's available to you, teaching wise. We went to a swimming pool, and then you're standing there and you've got all the gear on, the tank and the regs and everything else like that, and then you sort of put your head under the water for the first time and take that breath, and it's just it is quite weird for the first 30 seconds that you're underwater and you're breathing. You're still breathing normal air and you're underwater. It's quite weird, but yeah, I loved it, and yes, just took to it like duck does to water. Let's just say that.
Look at that. He's got something in there. Karsten the water baby Lenjoint. I'll have to see it. Now, when you're, I don't know, when it comes to the whole being underwater and diving now, like I've done like a bit casual snorkeling. I'm not going to pretend it's even the same sort of thing. But even that, the sort of, I don't know, the immersion and the sort of lack of distractions, like being quite present when you're going for these sort of, I don't know, hikes in like nature sort of thing, for example. You're not sat there staring at your phone. You're not thinking about work stress. You're thinking, okay, this is what I'm doing in the moment. Is that something that's always been quite important for you, having that kind of clarity, I want to say? That kind of being involved in what you're doing without distractions? Or are you quite, I don't know, do you think quite outside of what you're already doing when it comes to diving?
No, it was the best way to describe diving is kind of like yoga / meditation, sort of like, and a nature hike all in one. So you've got the kind of the yoga sort of situation where you're in a certain position in the water. You're in a position in the water. And then you've got the kind of meditation where you're concentrating on your breathing, constant, nice and relaxed and nice and normal. And then obviously, yeah, you've got all the nature around you. You've got the fish and the coral and everything else. So it is very sort of relaxing and sort of kind of meditation. What you're seeing around you as well. So yeah, it's awesome, man. It's so relaxing, and yeah, you don't really think of much else except for what you're actually doing. You're thinking about your position. You're thinking about the breathing. Make sure it's nice and relaxing, and make sure you're nice and relaxed underwater. Because obviously, the more nervous you are, the more you're going to breathe more, and the more you're going to go through your tank. And obviously, you want to stay down there for as long as you can. So you want to breathe nice and relaxed, so the air in the tank lasts longer and stuff. So yeah, it's just pretty cool. It's pretty relaxing, and you kind of zone out from everything above the surface, and you just concentrating on what's around you and everything else. So everything kind of fades away into the background, and you deal with everything else when you get back to the surface.
You kind of have to, really. And when it comes to diving as a whole, again, it's a huge spectrum. Obviously, you get these sort of levels. You're in the more contained areas, and you get obviously further and further afield. You get further underwater, further deeper sort of things. And again, different sort of climates. Now, from there onwards, there.
Oh yeah.
To take jiu-jitsu for a nice little parallel to keep it on Brown and MMA podcast is more in the sense of, okay, you're in your world, you're in your gym, for example, and this is your skill set. This is where you've developed. Yep. What would be your next preferable step? Is it to go further afield to another mat, for example, somewhere deeper, somewhere different within Thailand, somewhere further afield? Is it going deeper where you've already been? Is it, I don't know, what's the next progression from where you were there to where you want to go next?
So obviously you start, it's basically like kind of, we'll stick it to the jiu-jitsu thing. So it's basically like kind of getting belts. So like your beginner level is open water. That would be your white belt. Okay. And then the next course after that would be the advanced course. So with the advanced, you get to learn how to use your buoyancy better, which is your position in the water. You get to dive deeper. So you know a little bit more about the pressures going deeper. So on your open water, you're at 18 meters is the maximum depth. And then your advanced, you go down to 30 meters. So that would be kind of like a blue belt. And then once you've done that, you do your rescue course. That's the next course along. So that's in case anybody has problems, you can deal with, it's basically like a first aid course, but underwater first aid and sort of like on the surface. And, you get taught how to, if you see somebody struggling in the water, how to relax them, how to, if they're unconscious underwater, how to help them come to the surface, but safely, obviously, for yourself and for them. So that would be like your purple belt. And then after that, you've got your dive masters. So that's like your first professional level as a diver. So you can actually work as a dive master. So that's basically like it's a bit like a tour guide underwater. So say if you was an open water and advanced diver and you're going to somewhere new for the first time, so you don't know the layout of the dive site, you don't know what dangers there is or what there's good to see, you would sort of hire a dive master to be your tour guide for that dive, or the 2 dives you would normally do on a sort of trip, 2 or 3 dives. And so basically they sort of like, they're kind of keeping an eye on you, underwater, making sure you're okay, and, you know, showing you some cool stuff, showing you where the dangerous stuff is, and, you know, and sort of touring you around the dive site. So that's your dive master. So I guess that would be sort of the equivalent of a brown belt, I guess. And then you've got your instructor level, which is the person that actually teaches you your open water. So it teaches you your basics and then upwards as well. Obviously, being an instructor, you can teach, you know, multiple different sort of like courses. I guess that would be your black belt. And then obviously there's still so much more, same as jiu-jitsu. Even when you become a black belt, there's still so much more to learn. Different styles, you know, different sort of like positions, and, you know, De La Riva, and, you know, all the different sort of fancier, you know, guard positions and stuff like that. So that would be like your different courses after advanced, after your instructor's level. Like cave diving, you know, deeper diving. You've got twin sets, which is kind of like a different sort of setup for your diving. So you've got 2 tanks on your back, or you've got side mount, which is what I use quite a lot, which is more advanced, where you have 1 tank at one side and 1 tank at the other, rather than just the single tank on your back that you normally see in sort of like diving, you know, videos and bits and bobs and stuff like that. So there's so much more to learn, and that's just kind of like the different levels of, you know, I guess black belt, if we're bringing it back to a martial arts sort of, you know, comparison.
I mean, the real reason I use that sort of comparison tool is more in the sense of your own development, and then also taking it back to a coaching role as such. Like, for example, if you want to be a competitor, you don't have to necessarily be able to coach or go in that sort of remit as such. And the reason really going into this sort of topic is more, what was your next step regards to your preference? Was it to be more coaching and be more competent in that side of things, or be able to see more and go further in different places further afield? So again, you'll go more internal development, obviously staying in the same kind of area. Regards of where you are now with your skill set, what was your, I don't know, obviously now you're back in the UK, but whilst you're still out there on your next trip post-COVID, is diving still on the sort of radar in the sense if you don't want to go somewhere purely for diving? Is it more in the same kind of vein? It's an accessory thing if you want to go somewhere anyway, if it's an option? Where does diving sit when your sort of priorities now?
So on my priorities now, he's pretty high. I mean, I've done like 3 or 4 trips around Thailand to see different parts of Thailand, which were amazing. But now it's definitely something I look at when I plan to go somewhere. So I'll be like, right, okay, cool. So where's next on my list of countries to visit? You know, there's obviously a lot of on-land stuff that I want to see, but also, do they have diving? That's kind of like one of the first things I kind of think of now is, right, I'm planning to go to Indonesia. Do they have diving? Yes, they do. Okay, they have some of the best diving in the world. Perfect. So I can go and see some nice, you know, stuff on land, but then I can, you know, jump in the water and see some amazing things under the water as well. So yeah, it's really high up on my my priorities when I'm picking somewhere to visit now, definitely.
So go around sort of next logical steps there. So obviously you've been doing your diving, you've done your instructing side with there. What is then on your radar? Because obviously now you're living up, say happy sailing, but, you know, happy diving. Then what? What's your next logical step from sort of somewhere you're comfortable? What was your mindset there regards to the next sort of transitioning to different islands, moving about? What stopped you being comfortable and settling where you were?
Well, to be honest, I did settle for quite a long time in Koh Tao. So I was on Koh Tao for, all in all, nearly a year and a half. So give or take a few little breaks and a few little trips here and there and stuff. And, you know, going over to Philippines as well, and you know, traveling around Philippines for the month. But yeah, I kind of got settled quite a lot on Koh Tao, but that was more for my development, doing the courses. Koh Tao is known, you know, all over Thailand and probably all over the world as one of the best places to learn to dive. So for me to be able to get better as a diver, and be able to advance myself in my skills, and, you know, originally I didn't didn't actually think about it as to be an instructor. That was just something that kind of happened. But just to be on Koh Tao to do the courses, because they've got a bit of everything there that you need to do your different levels and stuff like that. So yeah, I settled on Koh Tao for quite a while, but I got to the point like earlier this year, obviously before all this happened with lockdown and stuff, where I was like, okay, cool, I've done everything I can do on Koh Tao now. It's ready for me to move away and, you know, even just travel and see different places and visit different dive sites and different countries to go diving that are like well known and stuff. That was the kind of plan for this year, but you know, that kind of like everybody's plans this year kind of went up in the air a little bit.
And this is an interesting thing in itself, because again, obviously your background, obviously primarily martial arts, and then coming over doing something completely different, similar vein of, you know, personal journey, development, and all the same sort of problem solving kind of elements that make the certain interests, like, you know, desirable. So regards of that then, how did you find getting back into, not back to reality as such, but more in the sense of, okay, this is something my familiar background, and then balancing the two? So you were saying you did a couple of sessions out in 10th Planet in Thailand. Was that something you, I don't know, did you warm back to quite nicely, or was it a bit like, okay, I'm wanting to go back to diving? Is it a bit of a hobby thing again? Where did that sit with regards of, I know, the transitions? Because obviously you're going from doing martial arts full time to then diving full time to, I don't know, that shift of priorities. Where did getting back into training sort of sit with that then?
Training is always something I'm always going to train. I'm always going to do some sort of jiu-jitsu or boxing or Muay Thai or anything I can kind of do. So I'm always going to train. So for a long time, diving did sort of take a priority because it was something new and it was something I was eager to learn. You know, I've done martial arts for so many years. You know, sometimes you needed a little bit of a break from it. But I did get to the point where I was missing it a lot. And, you know, again, on Koh Tao, we were really, really lucky that we had a 10 Planet club there. So 10 Planet Koh Tao, and ran by some great guys, some great coaches, a guy called Luke White, tongue twister for some reason, Luke White.
So the English name, yeah,
so he ran the, do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's so English, I couldn't say it. But yeah, he was obviously based on Koh Tao, been there for years, and you know, he's a dive instructor, but you know, a really high level brown belt 10 Planet Jiu-Jitsu guy. And he ran a club, and it was a really good club, and they had some really good lads on there, so it was good to get back into that as well. But it is hard when you dive and try and train. You can't train after you've been diving for like a good 4 to 6 hours. It's all to do with your nitrogen levels in your body. So it's hard to do both at the same time. You have to kind of pick your days. So you'd be a couple of days diving and then have a day off so you can do a bit of training, and then, you know, back diving again and then have a day off again so you can train again. So it's hard juggling the two at the same time. But yeah, I managed to do it towards the end of my time on Koh Tao. I managed to do it pretty well and get some good training in there while I was still managed to dive a bit as well.
And the nature of both those sort of interests, and I use interest instead of hobby. Hobby's a bit sort of, you know, talks down too much, whereas an interest is more specific anyway. Again, both those things, you need to be very present, you need to be very aware of what you do, and you can't be wrong thinking about, you know, how you need the curtains when you get home. You've got to be present, you've got to be in it. Yeah, and again, 100%. It must be so mentally taxing again, because again, your week's so consistent of things you have to be present for. And being present and going through the motions of two different things, you're very aware of what's going on. You have to pay attention the whole time. How did you find switching off as such? Because again, it must be you know, the world's smallest violin that, I don't know, Paul Karsten, he's in Thailand diving too much and rolling too much. He has to have a day off. How did you find actually being able to, I don't know, recharge as such? Because again, you're so mentally strained all the time doing all these things you have to be so attentive for.
I mean, I can switch off pretty well. You know, stick a film on and I'm good for a couple of hours. And you know, I don't really think about much while I'm watching the film and stuff. And on Koh Tao, exactly what you just said there. You know, I had, you know, the most beautiful tropical island to, you know, go and sit on the beach and just, you know, sit with my friends and have a drink and, you know, look out over onto the sea, or, you know, even just go up and have a little bit of a hike and, you know, sit up at one of the viewpoints and just sit and watch the sunset and stuff like that. So it wasn't hard to switch off the mental sort of side of stuff when I was over there on Koh Tao. It is a little bit more difficult to obviously switch stuff off when you're back here in England. But yeah, over there I didn't have too much of a problem switching things off.
And I mean, this is kind of quite an abrupt transition in itself, and we'll sort of get to there at some point. But it's more the general sort of step by step with this, and that when you're currently present there. Now, obviously, the highlight of the trip is starting the podcast. It's got to be, surely.
Obviously, podcast sat in my hammock. You know, I'd even say sat there naked in my hammock. You know,
but that's after hours one. Only fans. Link in bio. But this is an interesting thing in itself, because again, so you've gone from sort of living like for the day and then the following day sort of planning there that far ahead to then being on a relatively scheduled podcast, sort of, okay, we're getting some sort of structure laid out. How have you found, I don't know, how did you find in the regular podcast? Because again, initially it was, we did a similar one to this, sort of long form general chat, getting to know you, like, you know, having a conversation, to then you approaching me about the idea about doing a regular weekly podcast. How did you find getting into a regular sort of, I don't know, structure thing in that sense?
Yeah, I guess this was the only really structured thing I had when I was over there. It's still the only structured thing I have right now back here. So, no, it was cool. Like we did the first podcast, like you say, like this sort of situation, and I absolutely loved it. And doing a podcast it's always something that I've kind of thought of anyway. Just never really got around to it myself. And then obviously with us doing the podcast together, it just, you know, went on really well, and you know, we hit it off between ourselves, and then like you say, it was something that I kind of brought up. If you thought about doing a sort of weekly one rather than just one-offs with different people, and you know, we had a good chat about it, and then started it up, and yeah, I think it's been a great success. I think we've done really well with it so far, and you know, we keep improving and we keep pushing it forward, and you know, bringing all the results of, you know, the fight cards, which is great at the minute because they literally are weekly. So, you know, every week we have something new to talk about, which is helping our podcast. But yeah, no, it was great. And then having just that kind of like one day of structure a week was kind of good as well, just to get my brain into a sort of little bit more of a structured thinking as well. So yeah, it was really cool.
Like calibrating the week. Okay, so I've got seeing Dan tomorrow, so that means it must be a Monday or a Tuesday. So at some point it's going to be that again.
That was pretty much my thinking when I was over there. Yeah,
like a sundial. Okay, so it's there now. It must be 12.
Something like that.
But this is kind of it. The reason I wanted to sort of bring it up is more that sort of not abrupt transition, almost back to reality as such. Because again, you're going from other side of the world, I'm living the life, to okay, who's this Specky twat on the other side of the world trying to chat to me every week about, you know, fighting. And then obviously you have your English Sunday roast, Sunday breakfast, Sunday roast, trying to, like, you know, stick to your roots. And this is where it gets quite interesting, because when it comes to availability, now this is a perfect example. You get people who can't be asked and are not organised. We have done pretty much every week, from you in Kotal, in Germany, in Paris, back and forth everywhere, and now in Nottingham. And you tell me people can't do once a week or whatever, but people don't show up. I'm like, okay, you don't. There's levels to this.
Oh, 100%. Mate, we've done it in Kotal, we've done it in Koh Lipe, which is the opposite side of Thailand, which is like, you know, ridiculous. Like, you think of, you know, it's still in the same country, but compared to what we think of size of a country is, it's like, mate, we might as well have been in somewhere else in Europe. It's like, yeah, it's so far apart. I'm sure we did one in Bangkok as well. So we've done it in Kotal, Koh Lipe, in Bangkok, 3 different places in Thailand. Then we've done it in Germany, we've done it in France, and obviously now in England. So yeah, we're racking them air miles in, aren't we?
Mr. Worldwide, we'd love to see it. And this is kind of the thing in itself, regards of, like, I don't know, your input and the way your sort of style of our podcast. Where do you feel you get your sort of influence from? Because again, I'm getting mine from like Dan Strauss, Joe Rogan, and again, trying to still keep to my own individual input sort of thing. Like, how do you find keeping your own style versus also having influences and everything else?
I don't know. Obviously, I listen to the Joe Rogan. I listen to a few other podcasts as well, but Joe Rogan's the main one that I listen to personally. And I don't really sort of like get an influence from anybody as such. I just kind of, you know, do my own thing. You know, we just talk as we talk, as you know, as I would do as if you were sat next to me in the pub, and we just talk about, you know, different things and you know, how we thought the fights went. And the only kind of sort of serious part we have to do is when we're sort of breaking the fight down a little bit. But apart from that, we just, you know, me personally, I just talk like I would do if we were sat in the pub talking about fights. So I just kind of bring my own sort of, that's my just kind of style. I do me, and that's about it really.
100%. And this is kind of the point we sort of made as well, that it's that balance between, okay, we've got a template, not so much a structure. This is like, okay, we'll talk about this, that, and then the other, but make sure we're not scripting things, keeping things organic. And this is what I like about the way we're doing this and the way it keeps them going, the trajectory we're heading in. So other than, you know, blowing smoke up our asses, we'll move on from there. So again, we'll talk about the sort of transitions there. So obviously you're in Koh Tao, you're moving around everywhere.
Yep.
What is your, again, the word plan is only lack of a better choice of words, sense of, okay, I'm here, I'm living my life, you know, margaritas on the beach, and then I'm diving and enjoying the day. What is the preference going forward? Is it, okay, I'm going to just stick this out as far as I can take it? Is it, okay, I'm going to explore the rest of Thailand and try and go as far as I can with that? Is it, what else can I do? What else can I explore? What is your, I don't know, what was your sort of preference at that time?
So at that time, obviously, I was just happy on Koh Tao. You know, I'd made some amazing friends out there. There's some, honestly, absolutely brilliant people that I met out there, and that I'm still in touch with now, even though, you know, they're in Thailand and I'm back here in England. And then I've got other friends that were, you know, have moved back as well because of obviously the COVID situation and stuff like that. And obviously we're still in touch and stuff. So, you know, I was just enjoying myself on Koh Tao and, you know, living that life. But the reason why I originally left England was to travel. So then I started getting that travel bug. You know, I kind of, you know, I did what I could do diving wise on Koh Tao, got all the way up to instructor, and, you know, was teaching, you know, on a regular basis for a dive shop out there, 56 dive out there. So I kind of done what I could do there, which I was absolutely loving. And obviously it was an amazing sort of lifestyle to be able to teach diving, and then, you know, like you say, you know, sit on the beach and watch the sunsets and everything else that went with it. But then I wanted to start exploring a little bit more. I wanted to see a little bit more, especially of Thailand, because I've been there for that long and I'd only really seen sort of like Bangkok, a little bit of Chiang Mai, and then mostly Koh Tao. So I wanted to, you know, go over the other side and see different places. So you know, I did a few trips to different sort of like dive places and just islands and stuff as well. So, you know, I went over to the Simmerlands. I did what's called a liverboard over there. So you basically live on a boat and you dive different dive sites, because the Simmerlands is kind of like, you know, there's not many islands around there. They're kind of grouped around the island, but it's more the oceans, the Simmerlands. So I did that with one of my friends, Scotty. He's over in Australia now. He lives over there. He's a really good mate. I literally talked to him today about stuff. So about a reunion and stuff like that. So, you know, that goes into the, you know, meeting such great people over in Koh Tao. So we did that together. And then, you know, I popped down to around Phuket, diving around Phuket, and, you know, visited Phuket. But that was more in the lockdown sort of time, sort of just after the first lockdown and stuff. So I couldn't really see much of Phuket and sort of like really enjoy the island and sort of the trip, because obviously, you know, coming from martial arts background, we all know Phuket's like one of the main places for, you know, world champions to go train and stuff like that. So unfortunately, I couldn't experience that to the fullest and actually, you know, go to some of the gyms and train there. But I did it. I got to experience the dive side of stuff on Phuket, PP Islands as well, and then obviously Koh Lipe as well, which was, you know, for me, my highlight of diving so far was Koh Lipe and, you know, visiting the little island of Koh Lipe and diving some of the sites there, because it was absolutely beautiful underwater there. Just like amazing dive sites and amazing diving. So it was really cool. So yeah, it was awesome. Sort of like the last sort of part of my sort of Thai adventures, I guess, was spent sort of like traveling around a little bit and seeing a few different sites rather than just being on Koh Tao. It was pretty cool.
I mean, this is always that sort of transitioning point gets quite, I don't know, interesting, because again, you're there to travel, not to dive, so to speak. Because again, you went there with the intention to sort of, you know, not find yourself under a waterfall as such, like one of those sort of girls who comes back wearing those yoga pants, but no, you're there to try and, see more of the world and
There's
expand your
nothing
sort of horizons.
to do
Yeah,
that now.
I as a disclaimer, there's nothing wrong with yoga pants and all the rest of it. Whether it helps you drive your feet at 500 with a clear mind is up to you, mate. It's fine. That's your business. But as to say, yeah, it's interesting. Try not to say not stagnant as such, but yeah, trying. Okay, this is just home away from home as such, and then obviously the transitioning, still seeing more. But the fact you've come back to Nottingham now, obviously we're sort of saying, oh, there's sort of plans, everything going on in the world. How are you with settling in places and doing these sort of things? Because again, this whole idea of you've gone from, okay, it's an exciting opportunity, I'm going to explore. You get comfortable, you're enjoying your environments, you're developing, and then you go to explore again and you get that sort of fire rekindled. What is then your, I don't know, do you want to try and find somewhere you're comfortable again, or keep sparking that same flame of, oh, what else is out there? What is that sort of preference from there onwards then?
Well, in an ideal world without this COVID and lockdowns and everything else going on, I probably wouldn't have come back to England at the moment. My original plan was to sort of leave Koh Tao, see a few bits of Thailand, which I did do towards the end, and then actually just head out and see a bit more of Southeast Asia. I'd already travelled around Philippines for a month with a friend of mine, Alex, sort of last year. And I really wanted to go back to Philippines and see a little bit more and actually dive a little bit more, because they've got some amazing diving out there as well. So the plan was to actually travel a little bit more around Southeast Asia, do the whole Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, obviously, because the diving out there is just meant to be absolutely amazing. So that was one of my main plans. And then, once I'd sort of like traveled around for the rest of this summer, come back to England for Christmas, see my family this year for Christmas, and then next year maybe try South America. That was a loose plan. Like I said, I don't really make much plans, but that was kind of my loose plan for sort of like the second half of this year and the start of next year. But obviously with the lockdown and with the COVID situation around the world right now, everything's kind of up in the air and we can't really travel about as much. So yeah, I'm back in England now and I'm, settling here for a little while, probably a little while longer than I was expecting. But yeah, we'll just see what happens and with the COVID and with the lockdown and everything else.
Now, this is a huge point of why I wanted to get into the subject, because we're talking more about that whole balance, that whole contradiction of being quite chilled, quite laid back, sort of, work out as we go along. And also I want to do a lot. And
yep.
that trying to draw that parallel is always an interesting one. So when it comes to getting these plans in motion as such, what is the extent you're willing to plan for your own sort of preference of, obviously not so much the very anal itinerary, so to speak, but more so, okay, we'll book the ticket, we'll get the hotel when we get there, we'll see what looks nice. And then
that's literally my extent of planning. So I kind of, there was a very loose plan of sort of travel around. But yeah, my idea was literally, right, okay, cool. I'm in Thailand now. I want to go and see what Indonesia looks like. So it would have been a one-way ticket. I would have probably booked a hostel or a hotel in Bali for the first maybe 3 nights, just to know that I've got somewhere for 3 nights to see what's about and stuff like that. And then that would literally be all the planning I would do normally to visit a country, and then just in them 3 days see who I meet, see what's good, get any recommendations by people that I meet and stuff like that, and then just wing it. I'll be like, okay, cool. I've been in Bali 3 days. I really enjoy it, so I'm going to stay an extra 3 days. Or I'm not quite enjoying it, I'll pop down to one of the islands, maybe go to Lombok or Lombogan or somewhere like that. And yeah, just literally that's my style of planning. I don't do much more than that. And when it comes to sort of like planning which country next and stuff, it literally would have been like, okay, potluck, okay, we'll go to this country now. Okay, we'll go to this country next. And that's kind of my style of planning. I don't really do much more than that.
So whilst I deal with the anxiety that gives me, I'll give a shout to our sponsors. And so we've got the English Hypnotist, for anyone who wants to that extra step in the mental game. So whether it's in sport, whether it's in business, head over to englishhypnotist.com. And Richard Hart, absolute sound bloke, and it's really helped me because, again, certain like self-sabotage habits. Again, people know when you've been in those sort of pressure situations, you sort of crumble a little bit unnecessarily, not achieving your potential. It's always good to have a conversation with. You also have Rieco Clothing, really high quality products, and again, they've got quite a variety there as well. Be sure to check them out. And Pod 10 for 10% off. Ignore the voice crack; you didn't hear that. That's fine. And our man Chow, the People's IT for all your website needs. And again, the vegan pizzeria. Is this vegan pizza?
The vegan pizza company.
Kind of vegan pizza company.
Anybody around the Nottingham area, if you fancy a very, really good, healthy, really tasty vegan pizza, pop on to Instagram. It's the Vegan Pizza Company. He is in process of setting up his website. So it won't take long at all. So yeah, it'll be up and running really, really quick. So yeah, pop, check them out.
And a side plug, a little sideways one there. The Fisticuffs shorts will be arriving soon. We have medium and large available. Be sure to DM us directly and we'll get a pair sent out to you. So now, off the little tangent from our last subject.
Yep.
I'll give you a question or a topic and we'll go from there. Would you rather practice, in the words of Bruce Lee, would you rather practice one kick 10,000 times or do 10,000 different kicks? And the reason I say that is because, again, you've had jiu-jitsu, you've had MMA, the martial arts, you've experienced those, you developed those, and you've seen how far you can get being proficient in that and the fulfillment it can give you. And then you've also gone to something completely different. You've gone to diving and you've invested time in that and you've really sort of developed this sort of passion and interest with that. So what would you feel is more beneficial for you? Would you rather just put your eggs in those baskets and really go all in again on diving and jiu-jitsu? Or is it, keep casting it out, trying new things and trying to invest in more things and seeing how far you can get?
I'd say both. I'm both. It's a tough one, but I've got to say both, because when I kind of pick something, that's when it becomes I want to do the 10,000 one kick 10,000 times. So I pick it and I do it and I do it and I do it until I get better and better and better at that certain thing, whether it's diving or whether it's jiu-jitsu or whether it's boxing. But then once I've got to the level where, I feel comfortable in my own skills in that sort of thing, that's when I start looking for new skills to add to myself. So, like we said, I've done the boxing, I've done the MMA, I've done jiu-jitsu, and I'm at a comfortable level. Everybody can always improve and I can always get 10 times better. And my jiu-jitsu at the minute is absolutely terrible because I just haven't been practicing as much as what I really should do, or what I've been able to do. So my jiu-jitsu is not great in the minute, but it's something that I do know, and I've done it for so long that I know within, a couple of weeks to a month, my rustiness would have gone and I'll be back to kind of like feeling at the sort of level that I know I'm at. And that goes with the diving, it goes with the boxing as well. So it's always there it's in my back pocket, ready to sort of like brush up on whenever I need to. But I'm a big fan of adding new skills to myself. So, I'm always looking for something new that's going to sort of like spark that little bit of passion that, where I go, okay, I do really like this. Now I'm going to practice this one thing, 1,000 times until I get to the level where I know I'm comfortable at it in myself. And then I can, add that to my back pocket. So I've got them, and then I can, fall back on any of those whenever I want to. And, I can, mix them up and do a couple of them, or so that's my sort of thing. And, I've already kind of got my eye on something that I already know that I kind of want to do next as well. So yeah, it's something that was on my list when I started traveling, I never got around to do. So there's a few things. Again, we've got to wait until the world opens a little bit more before I can do a few more things. But yeah, there's plenty more out there for me to learn.
So I think you answered it without answering it as such, in the sense of, is it eggs of them all in one basket or loads of eggs in different baskets? And you said, well, both, which basically means put your eggs in the baskets, but put more eggs in each of those baskets. But
exactly, yeah.
Exactly, there we go, he knows.
The way you have to be, if you start doing something, I'm not one of these people that starts something and kind of flakes off. If I'm going to start something, I'm going to do it. So I'm going to use that philosophy of, I'm going to practice this one thing 1,000 times until I get to the level at where I know I'm good at. But I also want to experience lots of different things. but I want to do it at a good level. So I think it's just something you have to do. I don't know, maybe it's something not everybody does and not everybody thinks like this, but it's definitely the way that's the way I think.
So you'd rather do 10 kicks 1,000 times each?
Kind of, yeah.
There we go. That's a happy way of doing it, isn't it? I mean, this is why it gets quite interesting, because this is sort of the point I'm getting at, is that say if you're a white belt doing jiu-jitsu and, you know, you get your jiu-jitsu saved my life kind of phase, you're this, that and the other, but then you don't have the same level of, I don't know, I say experience in not just the, I don't know, ability sense, but obviously more going through the hardships, going through the highs and lows, everything else. And say we get to blue, purple belt kind of level ways, your blue belt will say competence, and then purple belt will say more advanced and more more aware of what's going on. Obviously, it's still progression, but you have an extra layer of competence. Like, do you feel that's the sort of level you'd be satisfied of? Okay, this is something I've given a sizable go. I can come back to it and feel comfortable, but I'm not, you know, a complete noob. Like, is that? Would you say you're a purple belt in diving? That same sort of like competence? Would you say it's more blue belt? Sort of, you know, you could go there comfortably. Is it like, you know, where do you feel you're at with diving?
I think I would be quite a high level at diving right now. There's still definitely a lot more I want to learn, but getting up to an instructor level is, you know, it's a pretty high level of diving, and especially the sort of diving I don't do regular, just the normal single tank. I most of the time when I dive is always with a side mount set, which is quite an advanced sort of like setup. So you've got your different styles of diving setup, and I use a side mount set pretty much all the time. So I'm using 2 different regulators. I have to actually switch from one regulator to the other regulator and make sure both ears working at the same time, making sure they're level. So it's quite a high sort of level. So yeah, I'm at the level where I'm pretty confident. You know, even if I had 6 months off, I could jump back in there and feel like one with the ocean again straight away. So
Very Moana kind of energy with that. I like that.
oh.
I mean, this is kind of the point I'm getting at more so. It's more the frequency of practicing as well. Because again, whilst you're doing your diving, you're not doing your jiu-jitsu, and then your next hobby, next interest, we won't go into that just yet. We'll keep that a surprise till you know, your purple belt level in that, and then you can start, you know,
And then I'll drop.
You can start to make something else, yeah. But it's more that sort of idea that okay, regards of frequency of practice there. So is it you're going to give more of a consistent stint to something in its own right, or is it trying to do dribs and drabs? Because you're saying with the training and the diving, you'd had to space them out. You had to plan that in itself. Would you rather do X amount of weeks consistently of one thing and the next amount of weeks of the other? Is it try balance them in the same kind of week? Is it periodizing? Because again, you can't do everything, but you also want to do everything.
Yeah. So I'm the kind of person that kind of gets a little bit obsessed with one thing at a time, but still kind of dips my toe in just to make sure I'm still not too rusty when it comes back to like the jiu-jitsu sort of thing. So when it came to the diving, obviously the diving took the priority. That was the main thing. I was learning, and I was, you know, experiencing new things with it, and, you know, trying different sort of styles, I guess, with setups and you know, doing different courses and learning more. But you know, I still kind of kept my little pinky toe into the jiu-jitsu as well by, you know, going once a week or maybe doing a Muay Thai session in the morning before I went diving. So that was a bit easier with obviously the not being able to train after diving and things like that. So I do still sort of like keep familiar with the things that I've already learned. But when I'm learning something new, I get very involved in that one sort of thing.
Now, the reason I want to go into this sort of subject as deep as I've gone so far, so to speak, is more in the sense of you get a lot of people where you want to do a lot of everything, and then it's sort of managing that as well. Because again, like even taking a mage to keep it on brand still, is that you want to get, you know, sharper jits, you want to get cleaner striking, you want to do everything, but there's only 7 days in this week. But what's your priority? And it's in trying to manage that, and also manage your expectations. Because again, if you're doing diving 4 or 5 times a week and you wonder why am I getting smashed and rolling on the Sunday, you think, okay, maybe there's a reason behind this.
Yeah.
This heart, and it's a whole sort of managing expectations. So now, regards of what is it about traveling which draws you to it as such? Is it the unknown? Is it what the potential? Is it certain things in itself? Is there what makes you want to travel? For a bit of a very broad question.
I don't know what necessarily makes me want to travel. I've just always wanted to do it. I just like experiencing new things. It's the reason why I do so many different things, I guess. I just like experiencing new things and trying new things. And I guess traveling, you've got that uncertainty where you don't really know what's happening sort of like the next day or the next day. And everything's kind of like a new experience. And I love meeting new people, and, you know, I love seeing different things. I like seeing things that, you know, the common Joe walking down the street hasn't seen. So I can always, you know, say I've seen things and, you know, experience different things and stuff like that. I've never been one of them people that kind of just, you know, I could never do, unfortunately, like a 9-to-5 office job and then, you know, not have any interest away from that. And, you know, you go to work, you come home, you go to work, you come home. And that's, you know, I know people that have done that for 20 years of their life. And I just couldn't do that. I like experiencing new things too much. So I guess the traveling side of things is just the want to experience different and new things all the time.
I mean, this is it. When I get to my 50s as well, I want to be just like you, mate. I want to grow up and be Karsten. But that's kind of it, though, because as much as it is for some people, it certainly isn't for like myself and you. It's that sort of idea that as much as I am currently doing a 9-to-5, the idea of doing what I'm doing 20 years down the line is terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, the idea of comfort is, I hate it so much. But this is kind of it, though. This is where I think COVID's very unsettling for a lot of people, much like yourself, because again, this isn't the ideal situation. You want to be able to have the words English. I'm doing a podcast. I can't speak still. 200 episodes in, I still can't speak. So you want to have the option to be able to, okay, I'm doing X amount of hours in the morning. Then in the afternoon, we're going to go off and do something else. Or do you know what? I've got my own sort of freedom. I want to go dive for a couple of hours and have some fun. But the key word is freedom.
100%. That is the key word, freedom.
Again, this is where it's been sort of threatened by the current climate. And again, we'll get very political now. Why not? But the whole sort of COVID crisis and this whole back and forth. So I'm going to pose a very interesting question. Very, not loaded, but I'm curious what your response would be. How do you feel about the current gym protests in the UK during lockdown?
I think gyms should still be allowed to be open. I think they should be classed as a necessary thing for people to do, both physically and mentally. You know, closing the gyms, I don't know. I'm just I'm a little bit skeptical with the whole COVID thing. I do believe that there is a disease or a virus called COVID, COVID-19. But you know, the death rate is so small, and the fact that, you know, gyms are so sticking to the rules and being so safe with it that I don't see why all the gyms should close. And that goes for a lot of other businesses as well. You know, obviously coming from, you know, the tattooing, piercing industry as well, is like going into one of them is like going into a doctor's surgery, if not even cleaner than a normal GP surgery. Do you know what I mean? So I don't understand why they can't be open. I don't understand why gyms can't be open as long as they're sticking to all the guidelines that, you know, that the government have put in place. I don't understand the government that much at the minute. So
the reason I wanted to ask that question is because, again, we're very much in an environment where we're part of the 1%, where gyms are such not just a casual part, like a hobby. Again, it's a very frequent part of our day-to-days. And we're all going to naturally have a bias that, okay, these are our friends, these are our family who we want to support, want to keep open. And it gets really interesting. So you get this whole spectrum of people, from the David Icks, the Dean Garnetts, to the people who sort of comply and crack on with things. And I don't think anyone's wrong. I feel there's a side for both of it. And this is where Bryce Mitchell's point, I want to go on this in our MMA show, more so in this sort of format, because again, I like the idea of it being optional. And a very valid point Bryce made was the amount of car accidents versus the amount of deaths by COVID, and that conversion, that we're still allowed to drive. There's still no restrictions on that outside of the usual sort of regulation things. And obviously the economic kind of
course
effect. And this is where certain things, like people take the piss about the sort of mask rules in restaurants, this, that, and the other. If anything, I think it's just damage control. I think it's a very open scenario. It's asking for a lot of it opens up a lot of opportunities for these sort of spreading of certain things. And I feel that's a very, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's the only real way to try and contain such an ambiguous thing in itself. And regards to the gym situation, the whole thing with Gaines in Bedford, a very like, mainstream gym, they're making such a case about staying open. And it kind of makes sense because the way they're saying about the conversion, because you had, I'll get the gym up now, the one from Liverpool where they managed to open in Liverpool. And the reason I'm bringing this topic up is I want to try and come from it from a very non-biased point of view. Because this is where these things get very tricky, because when you're on this sort of podcast in a very loaded format, it's hard to try and stay non-biased.
Yeah, definitely.
So whilst I'm finished waffling there, I want to sort of get more of an insight from your side of things regards to the COVID climate from like Thailand, when obviously you were there when it sort of started kicking off. What was it like in the Far East while this was all going off?
So on the island Koh Tao, where I was sort of living at the time, Thailand got very strict very quick. And I think they dealt with it really, really well, especially on our island. So literally as soon as the lockdown came in, and it was like the worldwide lockdown, all ferries with tourists and people traveling literally stopped. So that was nobody new coming on our island. Anybody that had any sort of symptoms or sort of like anything were sent straight off the island and over to Samui, which is where the big hospital is. We have like a little mini hospital on Koh Tao. And obviously we have a few doctors and stuff like that. But anybody that was sort of like giving symptoms or anything like that was sent straight over to Samui, to the big hospital to get tested. And then, just everything was locked down. So after 2 weeks of the island being closed, obviously everybody had gone through that quarantine period of 2 weeks. So everybody was sort of like fine, and we were allowed out and about. We still had to stick to certain rules. Masks was a big one. In Asia, they made masks as like a really high priority over there. So you had to wear a mask all the time, unless you were sort of like out in the actual open, like on the beach and stuff like that. All the restaurants closed. You couldn't be with any more than sort of like, I think it was 5 people. And they brought a curfew in as well. So at 10 o'clock, everybody had to be sort of in their own residence or in a residence where they were going to stay for the rest of the night until 6 a.m. So yeah, they did a really good job and sort of like eliminated most of the COVID situation straight away.
I mean, this is where the compliance is such a huge part of this. And this is where in the first lockdown, a lot of people were saying that, like statistically, people were surprised the level of compliance from obviously the UK public.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you get people who sort of, don't follow as such. And this is a huge argument about the whole freedom side of things. That you need to have structure to have freedom. And if everyone turns around and says, do you know what, I don't agree with this, don't believe in this, and no one follows it, we then have to have a bit more of an aggressive reaction to then regulate these things. This is where you get the more, the other side of the extremes, versus we all comply very nicely, but then invites more issues of, okay, if we're going to be sheep or whatever we're going to call it and be all these conspiracy theorists, then what else are we going to be susceptible for? And this is where the argument I use is a child gets an injection and they'll cry, but they won't appreciate what the injection's for. They don't understand it. They think, I don't get it. It's just going to hurt. I don't want this. I've never had like typhoid before. Why do I ever need this? It's all made up. And then, they don't, that's what I mean. It's a level of ignorance, a level of, you don't understand it. But also in the same breath, if you mindlessly agree with things, then what? But anyway, that's me off my soapbox. It's an interesting one. But this would be a nice little plug for our podcast. So regards to our podcast, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all podcast platforms. We're available on YouTube. And remember, any topics you'd like us to talk about, if doing any more long form ones like this, any more MMA shows, fire them away. Anything from you, my friend?
No, I'm all good, man. No, it was good to talk about other things that aren't just MMA all the time with you, mate. Yeah, it was good.
Awesome. All right, guys. The links to this will be in the description. Be sure to check out our sponsors.